Darius grew up in a neighborhood that seemed frozen in time, yet constantly moving in the wrong direction. Broken street lights flickered unevenly along cracked sidewalks, casting long shadows that crept like silent warnings. The hum of traffic and the occasional wail of a siren were the sounds that had replaced lullabies for children like him. Life, for most around him, was a fight for survival. And Darius had learned early that the world didn't hand out second chances, it handed out consequences, often without warning. His mother, Angela, worked 2 night shifts at a local hospital, and sometimes 3 if the bills piled up too high. She returned home exhausted, her back aching, her eyes heavy with fatigue, yet she always made time for Darius. Every evening, she would tuck him in, brushing his hair back and whispering, "You are stronger than you think, baby. Don't ever forget that." Her words were a lifeline, but they were also a challenge, an unspoken command to rise above the harshness surrounding him. Darius never knew his father. He had left before Darius's memories could form, leaving behind only vague promises and a space in the apartment that felt impossibly empty. Sometimes, late at night, Darius would lie on his bed staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would have been like to have a father there, guiding him, protecting him. But that fantasy quickly gave way to reality. The only guide he had was himself. School offered little refuge. The classrooms were crowded, teachers overworked, resources scarce. Many of his peers were already on the edge of trouble, some chasing fleeting thrills, others succumbing to neighborhood gangs. Darius could have been drawn into that world too, and often, he felt its pull. The streets whispered temptations and threats alike, quick money, quick fights, or quick escapes. But something inside him, a stubborn spark, refused to bow to that life. At 13, Darius discovered a tattered notebook in a local thrift shop. It was lined with faint blue pages and had a worn leather cover. He bought it with the few dollars he had saved from helping neighbors mow lawns and carry groceries. That notebook became sacred. Every night, he scribbled thoughts, hopes, and small dreams into its pages. Sometimes it was just a list: go to college, learn a trade, be better than yesterday. Other times, it was longer passages, a mix of poetry and reflection. Writing became his secret sanctuary, a place where the noise of the streets could not reach him. Despite his inner world of hope, life outside was relentless. By the age of 15, he had witnessed friends being arrested, families torn apart, and opportunities vanish in a blink. One of his closest friends, Jamal, had been caught in a robbery gone wrong. Darius still remembered the sound of the police sirens, the shouts, the handcuffs clicking, and the hollow look in Jamal's mother's eyes as she begged officers to give him a chance. That moment seared into Darius's memory, a reminder of how fragile youth could be in a place like theirs. Darius learned to navigate danger with caution. He kept to himself, observed, and listened. He learned which streets to avoid, which people to trust, and when silence was safer than speech. Yet, even as he adapted, he refused to allow fear to define him. That quiet defiance, often unnoticed by others, was his secret weapon. Evenings were the hardest. The apartment was small, and quiet moments stretched long. Sometimes, Angela would fall asleep mid-conversation, and Darius would be left staring at the ceiling or peering out the window at the city below. From that vantage point, the world seemed vast and unyielding, yet full of possibilities. He imagined stepping beyond the boundaries of his neighborhood, beyond the expectations of those who assumed he would never rise. One night, he opened his notebook and wrote, "I will not be broken by this place. I will not be defined by what I've been given. I will fight for my future." It wasn't just words, it was a promise. A declaration to himself that, no matter how many obstacles life threw in his path, he would find a way to overcome them. That promise, however, was fragile. The world outside his apartment was unforgiving, and Darius would soon face tests that could have crushed the resolve of anyone less determined. But the seed of resilience had been planted, watered by small victories, helping neighbors, learning from teachers, and most importantly, believing in the power of his own determination. As Darius lay in bed that night, he felt a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of what the streets could take from him next, but hope that he could be more than his circumstances. He had learned that struggle was inevitable, but surrender was optional. And deep inside, he knew that the journey ahead would demand every ounce of courage he had. Even as the shadows of the neighborhood stretched across his walls, Darius felt the first stirrings of something unstoppable, a will to rise above, to fight against the odds, and to refuse to let the world break him. By the time Darius turned 17, the world had already thrown him more challenges than most teenagers would face in a lifetime. School had become a daily grind, filled with distractions, pressure, and constant reminders that not everyone believed he would succeed. Neighborhood conflicts, whispered rumors, and the occasional run-in with law enforcement made each day a delicate balancing act. Darius had learned to walk cautiously, to keep his head down, and to avoid trouble, but sometimes trouble found him anyway. It happened one humid summer evening. Darius had been walking home from a shift at the corner store where he stacked shelves after school. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of asphalt and faint smoke from nearby barbecues. As he turned a corner, he noticed a group of local teens arguing. Their voices rose, sharp and dangerous, and before he could turn away, one of them shoved him roughly. "What are you doing here?" the boy snapped, glaring. I'm just walking home," Darius stammered, trying to step back. But the boy didn't stop. The argument escalated quickly. Fists were raised, voices shouted, and suddenly Darius found himself caught in the middle of something that had nothing to do with him. Fear shot through his body, every instinct screaming to run, but running wasn't always safe in these streets. A police car arrived at the scene moments later, sirens wailing. The teens scattered, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Darius alone with the flashing lights and the questioning officers. Despite his innocence, the officers eyed him skeptically. His heart pounded as he answered their questions, but the tension didn't ease until they finally waved him off. Shaken, Darius continued walking home, each step heavy with frustration and a sense of injustice. It wasn't the first time life had treated him unfairly, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. Yet, as he trudged along the cracked sidewalks, a determination began to simmer inside him. He refused to let this moment define him. That night, he climbed to the roof of his apartment building, the city lights glittering like distant stars. The neighborhood below seemed both small and overwhelming at the same time, a place that could crush dreams or nurture them, depending on how one fought. Darius sat there for hours, replaying the day in his mind. He thought about his mother, tirelessly working to keep them afloat, and about the friends who had already succumbed to circumstances that had tried to claim him too. And then he spoke aloud, in a voice barely more than a whisper, "I refuse to be broken. I will fight. No matter what the world throws at me, I will rise." Those words were more than a promise, they were a lifeline. In that moment, Darius realized something crucial: the world would not hand him victory, he had to claim it himself. Every challenge, every insult, every setback was an opportunity to test his strength and resilience. He could be knocked down, yes, but only he could choose whether to stay down. Over the next few months, Darius faced trial after trial. Teachers doubted his focus, peers mocked his quiet determination, and life seemed to throw obstacle after obstacle in his path. Yet he persisted. He took on multiple part-time jobs, delivering groceries, tutoring younger kids, cleaning vacant houses, anything to earn money and gain experience. He also committed himself to self-education, reading books borrowed from the local library, studying skills that might one day help him create a better life. Every rejection, every moment of doubt, only strengthened his resolve. Darius began to see patterns where others saw chaos. He recognized that his anger could be channeled, his frustration could be a tool, and his fear could become fuel. The fire of his struggles wasn't meant to destroy him, it was meant to forge him into someone stronger, sharper, and unyielding. One rainy evening, soaked to the bone after helping a neighbor repair a leaking roof, Darius returned home and collapsed into a chair. He was exhausted, every muscle aching, yet a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Pain was still present, but he had discovered something far more powerful: control over himself, and the realization that persistence could outweigh circumstance. From that night forward, Darius began approaching life differently. He still faced obstacles, still walked the streets where danger lurked, and still felt the weight of his environment pressing down on him. But he also carried something invisible yet unshakable: the knowledge that he could fight, endure, and survive on his own terms. The storm had broken, but it had not destroyed him. It had awakened him. And with that awakening came a new chapter, one in which Darius would rise, not just to survive, but to transform his life completely. After the storm of his 17th year, Darius emerged with something stronger than fear or anger. He emerged with purpose. The events that had nearly broken him became lessons in resilience. He realized that life would continue to challenge him, but for the first time, he believed he could meet those challenges on his own terms. Darius knew he couldn't rely on luck or chance. He began taking small steps toward self-improvement and independence. Every morning, he rose before sunrise, long before the city had fully awakened. He helped his mother with chores, prepared himself for the day, and then set out to work multiple jobs, delivering groceries, assisting with neighborhood repairs, and tutoring younger kids after school. Each task was exhausting, but he welcomed it. Physical labor became more than a necessity, it became discipline, shaping his mind as much as his body. At night, he devoted himself to learning. The local library became his sanctuary, a place where knowledge felt limitless. He studied business principles, basic accounting, and leadership skills, all while keeping his tattered notebook close. Ideas flowed onto its pages: ways to improve the neighborhood, ways to start a business, ways to inspire others. Every word was a promise to himself that he would rise above his circumstances. Darius faced skepticism everywhere. People questioned his focus, mocked his ambitions, and doubted that a boy from his neighborhood could accomplish anything meaningful. Even some friends told him, "Why stress yourself? You'll never make it out of here." But Darius refused to let the voices of doubt dictate his path. He had learned that the world would often try to break those who dared to dream, and that was precisely why he had to persist. Slowly, his reputation began to shift. Word spread that Darius was dependable, disciplined, and skilled. Neighbors trusted him with tasks that required more than strength, they required integrity. He repaired fences, fixed plumbing leaks, painted walls, and handled electrical problems with care and precision. Each successful job brought not only income but also recognition, small victories that reaffirmed his belief in himself. But Darius's growth wasn't just about earning money or building a reputation, it was about mastering control over his own life. He learned to manage time efficiently, balance responsibilities, and make decisions with long-term consequences in mind. Mistakes still happened. Sometimes he miscalculated a project, overcommitted himself, or faced clients who were unkind or dismissive, but he treated each failure as a lesson rather than a setback. He also began mentoring younger kids in the neighborhood, just as he had been mentored by his mother's words and his own experiences. He taught them small skills, like painting and fixing broken furniture, and encouraged them to stay in school and pursue opportunities that might seem out of reach. Through these actions, Darius realized that fighting the odds wasn't just personal, it could ripple outward, touching the lives of others. One particularly rainy evening, Darius was repairing a neighbor's roof when he looked down at the streets below. The familiar flickering streetlights, the cracked sidewalks, the echo of distant sirens, they had once felt like chains holding him down. Now, they seemed like markers of a path he had already begun to climb. Each job he completed, each life he touched, was a rung on a ladder towards something greater. As the months passed, Darius also honed his entrepreneurial skills. He began offering more specialized services, managing projects that required planning, negotiation, and problem solving. He tracked his progress meticulously in his notebook, refining budgets, noting client feedback, and setting goals for expansion. His vision grew clearer. He didn't just want to survive, he wanted to create a sustainable business that could support him, his family, and the youth of his community. Yet, for all the progress, Darius remained grounded. He knew that true success wasn't measured in money or accolades, but in resilience, integrity, and the ability to uplift others while pursuing one's own path. Each day, he reminded himself of the promise he had whispered to the night sky years ago: "I refuse to be broken." That vow had become a mantra, guiding every decision and fueling every action. By the end of this chapter of his life, Darius had transformed from a boy weighed down by circumstance into a young man steadily climbing toward a future of his own design. He had turned hardship into skill, frustration into focus, and doubt into determination. The odds that once seemed insurmountable were now obstacles he navigated with strategy and courage. And though the journey was far from over, Darius now understood a vital truth: fighting the odds was not about eliminating struggle, it was about refusing to surrender, no matter how fierce the storm. By the time Darius reached his mid-20s, the boy who had once felt powerless in the shadows of his neighborhood had become a man who commanded respect not through fear or force, but through persistence, skill, and integrity. Every struggle he had endured, the broken streets, the hardships at home, the moments of doubt and near defeat, had shaped him into someone capable of transformation. And he was determined to ensure that transformation didn't stop with him. Darius's small handyman and repair service had grown into a thriving business. What had begun as neighborhood chores now extended across the city, encompassing renovations, maintenance, and consulting for clients who valued reliability and quality. But for Darius, the true victory wasn't the contracts or the growing profits, it was the lives he could influence through his work. He hired young people from his neighborhood, many of whom were exactly like he had been: lost, underestimated, and facing countless obstacles. To Darius, this was not charity, it was opportunity. He trained them in practical skills, yes, but more importantly, he instilled the principles that had guided him through his own storm: discipline, persistence, and self-respect. He became not only a mentor but a living example of what was possible when one refused to be broken. One evening, Darius was invited to speak at a community event. The auditorium was filled with young men and women who reminded him of his own teenage self, uncertain, restless, and quietly desperate for a reason to believe in something greater. Standing backstage, Darius took a deep breath. He remembered the nights of struggle, the rooftop promises, and the countless hours of labor and learning. Everything had led to this moment, not for fame or recognition, but to offer hope. When he walked onto the stage, the applause was warm, but it didn't matter. What mattered was connection. He began to speak, recounting not the flashy highlights of success, but the raw, untold moments, the fear, the humiliation, the nights spent exhausted yet determined. He shared the mistakes he had made and the lessons they taught him. And as he spoke, he saw eyes widen with recognition. The audience was not just listening, they were seeing themselves in his story. After the speech, a young man approached him hesitantly. I didn't think it was possible to get out of here," he said quietly. "But seeing you, I feel like I can try." Darius smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can," he said firmly. "The world may try to break you, but you have to decide that you won't let it. You fight, you learn, you rise every single day." Darius had also used his success to improve his neighborhood. He funded community programs, repaired abandoned buildings, and established workshops where young people could learn trade skills. The streets that had once felt like cages were slowly transforming into spaces of opportunity and growth. He had learned firsthand that fighting the odds wasn't just about personal success, it was about lifting others as you climb. At home, his mother, Angela, had finally retired from her grueling jobs. She watched Darius with pride that was almost palpable. "You've done more than survive," she said one evening. "You've changed everything, not just for yourself, but for all of us." Darius nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle warmly in his chest. He had always promised himself he would rise, but now he understood that rising also meant creating a ripple that others could follow. Even in the midst of triumph, Darius remained grounded. He knew that life would continue to test him, that obstacles would continue to appear. But the difference now was that he had faith in his ability to endure, adapt, and succeed. Every challenge was no longer a threat, it was an opportunity to grow stronger, to inspire, and to make a difference. One night, as he stood on the balcony of his apartment overlooking the neighborhood he had once feared, Darius reflected on his journey. The streets, once dark and oppressive, now seemed alive with possibility. He thought about the promise he had whispered to himself on that rooftop years ago: "I refuse to be broken." It had become more than a personal vow, it was a guiding principle, one that he now passed on to countless others. In that quiet moment, Darius understood the true meaning of triumph. It wasn't about wealth, recognition, or personal comfort. It was about transformation, of oneself, of a community, and of the countless lives touched by resilience and determination. Every obstacle he had faced had contributed to this legacy, shaping a life that could not be undone by circumstance. Darius smiled as the city lights shimmered below. He had fought every odd, endured every challenge, and refused to let the world define him. And in doing so, he had created something far greater than himself, a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and unwavering determination. He had not only survived the storm, he had become the storm that reshaped his world, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come.